Hello, it's your instructor Jacob Campbell here again for the second video of this weekend. Now, I don't feel that bad about making this a little longer than the lecture we missed because honestly, I didn't really give you any homework to do this week either, did I? But what I hope to cover in this video is I'm going to give you an introduction to excludability and rivalry. You need to have that watched by Monday. And then I'm going to talk about public goods and free rider problems. I would prefer to do this in class if I could, but honestly, this might be the best opportunity we have all semester to actually get a little ahead of schedule. And I'd rather tell you about the tragedy of the commons in person. It's just a lot more fun. Not that public goods aren't fun because all of this is fun, but uh, I like tragedy of the commons more. So, excludability and rivalry. This one should be like somewhat short. Now, up to this point in the class, there have been these two implicit assumptions about goods. I never explicitly stated them. It's just something that was kind of always there in the background. And these assumptions are that goods are both what we call rivalrous and excludable. Now, what does it mean to be rivalrous? Rivalrous means that you cannot use the good without denying it to someone else. You cannot use it and someone else also use it at the same time. Now, with a lot of consumable goods, this makes a lot of sense. Two people cannot eat the same burger, for example. Two people cannot eat the same pizza. You might share a pizza in the sense that you might like cut it up, but you both can't eat the same slice of pizza. Two people cannot use like the same gallon of gasoline in two different cars, driving in two different directions, and so on and so forth. Consumable goods, by their very nature, are destroyed when they're consumed. But a lot of durable goods are also rivalrous. Actually, just about any good, frankly, is rivalrous. Two people might both be able to wear a suit or wear like two girls might wear the same dress or something, but they're not going to wear it at the same time. You're not going to both like put on a pair of pants standing one right behind the other and tighten up your belt and walk around that way. Uh, Two people aren't going to drive the same car in opposite directions at the same time. Even with something like, say, a home, you can, up to a certain limit, fit more people inside of the house, but you would eventually hit some kind of hypothetical limit. You would hit a maximum density of people you could fit in. I tell you, this reminds me of something really dumb that my growth and development professor said way back when I was a college student at Tennessee Tech. He he claimed once that the Mexican population in the U.S. could not possibly be as large as Trump claimed because there wasn't enough housing for them. Like economists had solved they'd solved this and they said, oh no, you have like four people per house. There's not enough houses in the country. It's like, dude, have you ever known one? They're some of those homes, they're about as dense as a black hole. People are so tightly packed in. We had a Mexican community in Cookville when I was a student back there. I my first girlfriend was the daughter of illegals. So I don't feel real guilty at poking a little fun. But most physical things, they're going to have this property of rivalry. You can't. Both use the same thing at the same time. And this is also going to be true of a large number of services as well. So two people can have the same haircut style, but the same barber can't do the same haircut on two people at once. If a barber wants to give a haircut to two people, he has to perform two haircuts. If a heart surgeon wants to perform two heart surgeries, he has to do two heart surgeries, right? He can't do the operation one time, but make several people get the consequences. So rivalry always implies that in order to provide more of the good, you have to expend more resources creating it because it takes more raw materials and it takes more labor for every extra unit of production you intend to put out. Now that's rivalry. What about excludability? Well, excludability it refers to the idea that if you own the good, you can stop other people from using it without your permission. Now, that's a very simple idea. It's just that if you say no, you have the physical and legal ability to prevent them from taking the good or using the good without your blessing. I should give some examples of non-rivalrous goods. Streaming services are a prime example of a non-rivalrous service. It doesn't cost the streaming service anything extra to let another person watch it, right? It's just a digital account. It's not like they have a Netflix machine that makes Netflixes. They could, in principle, give it away for free. Now, in reality, most goods are going to be somewhat rivalrous, and most goods are also going to be excludable at some cost. So, just about anything, pretty much anything in this world is non excludable if you don't defend it. I have a very pessimistic view of human nature, obviously, right? Look at what profession I went into. I assume, right, I was brought up by my policeman father to assume that anything you leave out in public is going to get stolen. I've even made a goal to teach this to other people. So like you see a colleague, they have their backpack sitting on the floor of their office. I'll just snatch up that backpack and run off with it. He got really aggravated. He accused me of being a child. But um most things that they're only excludable when you put in the effort of excluding people. But this could be cheaper or it could be more expensive depending on the nature of the item. Likewise, they'll be excludable or not based on the legal environment you're talking about. Do you even have the right to stop someone? So, for example, homes would normally be considered very excludable. You try to barge into someone's house uninvited, you will catch buckshot to your core. But in a lot of cities lately, you hear about them in the news all the time. They have very strong squatters' rights. You will be the one that goes to prison if you unload some buckshot on that squatter. And so what was an excludable good effectively becomes non-excludable by the act of the state. Likewise, with that rivalry, oftentimes, even if a thing is not strictly rivalrous, it'll very often be what we call a network good. I used to teach that as part of externalities, but I've moved it back to competition and I have a reason why. But the brief pitch of it is just that with some items, how valuable they are to us depends on how many other people use them. It's not considered an externality because it ends up getting factored into the price. Other people make the thing more or less attractive to me. That raises my willingness to, or lowers it, my willingness to pay for it. But we see this with things like roads. There is no real limit on how many cars you can have on a road at a given time. You almost never see literal bumper to bumper traffic except during traffic jams. That's not a normal state of affairs. But the more cars you allow onto a road, the worse of an experience it's going to be for everybody on that road. So this is one big thing I want to stress. And if you have the textbook's going to talk about it like it's a very black and white thing. It's one or the other. That's the model being a model. In real life, everything is a shade of gray. Everything is more in one direction than the other, but nothing falls into some 100% clear-cut category. Now, when you think of these things as being like a spectrum, you can simplify them down into a handful of goods. So if you're a political spurg, then you probably know your Nolan chart with like liberal, libertarian, conservative, fascist, whatever all junk on it. Well, this is going to be like a Nolan chart of good types. We're going to classify them based on their excludability and their rivalry. And for things that are excludable and rivalrous, I can stop people from taking it, and taking it leaves less for others. We call those private goods. For goods that you can exclude people from taking, but it doesn't cost you anything to give them away, we call those club goods. And then we have the two types where you can't stop people from taking it. Well, if taking it leaves less for others, we call that a commons good. The textbook might also call it open access. I'm always going to call it a commons good or a common good. And if you can't stop people from using it, but it does not take away from other people, we call that a public good. Now, I'm going to give you some examples of each category. In the case of a private good, that would again be almost any physical object. Just about every physical thing that you can think of is private in nature. How do you exclude people from taking it? You keep it to yourself. You keep it away from them. You guard it. How does using it deny it to others? Well, it's physical. It's a real physical object. It can't be in two places at once. We're not doing quantum economics in here. Now, if the club goods, right, that's the one where you can stop somebody from taking it, but it doesn't leave less for others. And so what kinds of things would that include? Well, I already mentioned streaming services, subscriptions in general. So if you have a subscription to Amazon Prime, if you have a subscription to Netflix, if you have a subscription to a newspaper, now the actual delivery, right? The actual truck itself, that's a private good. But being allowed into some sort of club, being given some kind of privilege, being let in on some sort of deal, that is pretty much always a club good. You can think of this as going along with literal memberships into social clubs. If you're a member of some kind of student organization, maybe you're a frat boy, maybe you're a sorority girl, maybe you're one of those marching band weirdos, then you have some kind of dues you have to pay. And they can just refuse to, like, if you show up anyways, they're just not going to pay attention to you. They can refuse to let you participate in their stuff if you don't pay. But in principle, they could let anyone join, couldn't they? It might not be the most impressive fraternity and it might not be the best sounding marching band if they let anyone join, but there's no like physical obstacle to them doing so. This will apply to social organizations. It'll apply to things like a membership at Sam's Club or Costco. Any sort of service of that nature. Then with the commons goods, those are the ones where you can't stop people from taking it, and taking it leaves less for others. Well, that would include things like fish in the ocean, clean air. Honestly, what you're going to find in the next few lectures is that most commons goods are only commons goods because the government makes them commons goods. But back in the day, when you think of things like the overhunting of animals, frontier times, animals were a commons good back then. People didn't own the deer, they didn't own the buffalo. And there was no restriction on their ability to go and just kill as many as they wanted. And then finally, with your public good, again, that's stuff that you receiving the service doesn't deplete it for anyone else. You can't force anyone to pay to get it, but you also can't it doesn't hurt anyone that you get it too. And pure public goods don't really exist. This is something we're going to talk about momentarily. They don't really exist, but things that look like a public good, things that you might say, like they're not going to be down in this corner, but they might be in like this area. That would include things like law enforcement, defense, public sanitation. Uh, Literally things that we think of as being normal functions of government. So something being provided by the government does not make it a public good in the economics meaning of the word. But the reason why we call them public goods is because they're things that economics says the government should take care of. And you'll see why in this lecture. You'll get the economic argument for why the government would have to. Now, as long as a good is excludable, we could expect it to be efficient because it can be turned into property and it can be priced in markets. But non-excludability is going to introduce a major problem because it's impossible to form a market. If you can't stop people from taking the good without permission, then you can't effectively force them to pay for it. If you can't force them to pay for it, then you have no market at all. You have no rationing mechanism to like limit who can get it, and you have no incentive to produce it. So markets are going to completely fall apart on non-excludable goods. And then, based on whether the good is rivalrous or not, there's one of two specific kinds of market failures that's going to arise out of this. So we have a case where the good is non-excludable, but it's still rivalrous. You can't force them to pay, but them taking some does leave less for others. And what you're going to see in that case is that a lack of property rights results in too much being taken, what we call the tragedy of the commons. And the solution to this is going to be to create a property right. In a sense, this is a market failure, but at its heart, it's really more of a policy failure because this is a situation where if you expand the market, if you make it larger in its conception. If you allow people to trade more types of things, that fixes the problem. Then on the other hand, we have the non-excludable, non-rival risk good, the public good. And with those, instead of there being too much being taken, there's going to be not enough being made due to what we call free rider problems. And the solution to these is that it's going to have to be publicly provided. So both of our goods that are considered non-excludable, they both result in failures. But depending on if they're rival risks or not, you either get too much production or too little production. And you either have to fix it with more markets or with the government. It all depends on the nature of the good itself. Does taking the good leave less for other people? And this is where we're going to start off with public goods, the non-excludable, non-rival risk case. I'll see you in the next one.